Here it comes again. Lunch. Will it be the same old, same old? Or are you ready to take a vacation from the ordinary with the new Jamaican Jerk Turkey Sub at Firehouse Subs? Freshly sliced smoked turkey breast, craveably sweet mustard sauce, and a hint of Caribbean seasoning. Just $5.55 for a medium. Save time. Order the new Jamaican Jerk Turkey Sub on the Firehouse Subs app. Firehouse Subs. Enjoy more subs. Save more lives. Participating locations. Limited time only, plus tax. Prices may vary for delivery.
Welcome to the Source Material Podcast. We're coming back at you here. It's episode 227. And this week here on the podcast, we're going to be discussing a early 2000s book, according to what I'm seeing here. I got it listed as early 2003. The Wiki's got it listed as being publication date of December 2002. And we're talking Gotham Central. This is a book that completely flew under my radar. I didn't even know existed. But thanks to a suggestion by our Canadian office representative, Andrew Graham, he suggested this to Mark, and we decided we were going to cover it. Unfortunately, Andrew could not come on to talk about it with us tonight, but we have the one and only Chris Armstrong from the Unspoken Decade. Sir, are you ready to talk Gotham Central tonight?
I'm ready to hit the streets.
Hit the streets. All right. You know, they call me street level starch, as a matter of fact. And
News to me.
Yeah. Mark Radwich, are we doing this book for any particular reason other than just it was suggested, or are we tying this in with anything? I don't think we are we?
Tying it into Men in Black International.
Ooh, all right. I mean, yeah, there are some loose ties there. A government agency / police office / something or other.
Mystery, maybe.
Yeah.
Let me explain to you what we're doing here tonight. Because you see, in the criminal justice system, sexually based offenses are considered especially heinous. In Gotham City, the dedicated detectives who investigate these vicious felonies are members of an elite squad known as the Special Victims Unit. And these are their stories.
Dong dong. Andrew Graham suggested this, and we're running with it. Is that right?
Yeah, what he said was that in the criminal justice system, there are people represented by two separate but equally important groups.
Great.
The police who investigate crime and the district attorneys who prosecute the offenders. These are their stories.
Somewhere? Chris, how about you, man? I mean, Gotham Central, is this something that you were aware of before we covered this?
I have never read the entire run, but I've read these stories before. I think this is the only ones that I've read up to this point. And I've got all the trades, so I was excited to get back into this so I can, finish. It was only, I think, 30-something issues. It didn't go too awful long. So I get to read this and then finish up what I haven't read. When it initially came out in the early 2000s, I remember seeing it on the shelf, and I was like, that could be interesting, but I'm going to spend my money on Superman or whatever, whatever superhero comics I was really into at the time. So it wasn't until years later that I went back after hearing how good it was and got a couple of trades and realized that I'd been missing out.
Okay. Yeah, if I saw this on the shelf at that point in time, I probably would have associated. Do you guys remember the comic Damage Control for Marvel?
I loved Damage Control.
Okay, I don't think I've read it very much. I just remember it being okay, well, here's the tales of humans dealing with the fact that superheroes are amongst their city. That's kind of the impression I got from the looks of this. It's okay, well, this is a bunch of cops living in Gotham trying to deal with all the goings on with criminals and of course Batman. So I wouldn't have been tempted to pick this up. It's written by Ed Brubaker, Greg Rucka, two writers that I've heard a lot of here recently. Back in the early 2000s, boy, I don't know if they really had much of a name. Let's take a look.
I think Rucka had already established himself pretty well by this time, but I think Brubaker was really just starting to be noticed by a lot of people.
Okay.
We know Greg Rucka from his run on Wonder Woman, by the way.
Hecate, or however the hell you pronounce it. I remember we covered that.
Right. I also have the trade for Greg Rucka's Wonder Woman Volume 1.
Yeah, Brubaker has, according to what I see here, he has nominations, 1993 Eisner Award nominee for Best Writer-Artist Team on Accidental Death. Never heard of that.
Hey, that 9/11 book that you sent me, Ed Brubaker was actually one of those.
Oh, was he?
Yeah.
Interesting. Very interesting. So, I mean, he's got some independent work for sure, but just like you said there, Chris, I think he really caught fire there. I mean, he actually won an award for disguises from Catwoman number 17 through 19, Lad Media Awards, Outstanding Comic Book Catwoman by Ed Brubaker. So, yeah, he's really starting to become a pretty good writer and recognized there in the early 2000s. And yeah, Rucka, just like Mark said, Wonder Woman.
He had done Queen and Country, I think, for Oni Press, maybe. I think that was the first thing I'd ever heard of that he had worked on.
Okay. 99 Eisner Award, Best Limited Series for Whiteout.
Hey, Jesse, Brubaker wrote What If Aunt May Had Died Instead of Uncle Ben?
No, we've covered that on here.
Yeah, that's why I brought it up.
Oh, interesting. Okay, very cool. All right, well, so yeah, Gotham Central, we're getting into this. What we're going to do, there's 3 stories covering 10 issues. This is also art by Michael Lark, for anybody that's keen on who the artist was, which Mark, I'll ask you just real quick. I mean, the story and the art are usually 2 things we talk about on here, specifically if you don't like the art. In this case, let's get it out of the way right now. What do you think of the art of the series?
I thought it was fine. I mean, very comic booky, but it's not Stephen Keith.
Sam Keith.
Thank you. Gosh, it's every time. You can never remember the dude's first name.
It's not Schmeckeldorf Keith.
Gosh, I hate you. All right. Well, I want to do like the first 10 issues of Max. That's all I want to do, Mark. I want to make you sit down and read the first 10 issues of the Max.
Is that what do you call it? Sylvester Keith wrote that?
Yeah.
Or drew that rather?
Yeah. Anyway. All right, so our first 2 issues in the line of duty. This one's written by both Ed Brubaker and Greg Rucka, which this is one of the first series I think I've ever seen this on, where the 2 writers are all you get basically on all 40 issues of Gotham Central, but they switch off. So this one, and then they team up sometimes. So this one is helmed by both Brubaker and Rucka, and then our next set, which is issues 3 through 5, are done by Brubaker, and 6 through 10 are done by Rucka. Again, all art by Michael Lark, but I've never seen that where 2 writers will just kind of switch off or team up, but it's always continuously throughout this series, which I think is very neat. All right, so our first 2 issues, titled In the Line of Duty. I'll just read from the wiki here. Marcus Driver's partner, Charlie, is killed by Mr. Freeze while the pair are investigating a lead on a case involving a kidnapped girl by the name of Bonnie Lewis, I believe, making the Major Crimes Unit aware of a bigger plot by Freeze. So this is just a real simple 2-parter.
Tag me in.
Oh, go for it.
The major push of this 2-issue arc is that a cop is killed while investigating a kidnapping by Mr. Freeze. Now, Mr. Freeze had nothing to do with the kidnapping. That's a whole other thing. But in the midst of trying to solve the kidnapping, they happened upon Mr. Freeze, and he kills one of the cops. He kills the partner of our lead in this story. Really, what the story is about is what place do the cops have in Gotham when Batman's there doing what he does, and the cops feeling, they're the cops kind of, feeling grateful but displaced and feeling a need to prove themselves, especially this one particular cop. He wants to solve, he wants to catch the murderer of his partner, and he wants to do it without the Batman's help, just to prove a point. And the point is that we don't need you. That's really the thrust of it, and basically the action of this thing is just them doing detective work as the clock runs out, because they know that once nightfall comes, Batman's going to get involved, and they're going to lose their opportunity to prove that they are just as worthy and just as needed as Batman.
Yeah, it's interesting to see the 2, the police force and Batman. One can't recognize the police force can't recognize Batman as an aide to them, but they know that he is. I remember specifically one part of this particular arc is where they're getting ready to, I think, send the bat signal up. The police force can't touch it, because if they do, that's symbolically showing that they recognize the Batman is out there and they're relying upon him to help them with their cases. So it's a really interesting dynamic between the 2, Gotham City Police and, of course, Batman, this vigilante that runs the night. I like that one part where they're talking about how the one guy he brought up a oh, what was it? He had a picture or something. I can't remember. Maybe it was a story, but it was there to remind the rest of the major crimes unit that Batman's out there, and your goal is to try and get the cases off before he does, because it's supposed to be your job to do this, to find and solve these cases, and not rely on Batman. Because if you do, it's you're not doing your job. But anyway, yeah, and we got a good look at Marcus Driver too here, who is, I think, one of the central figures in these first 5 issues. When we get into Motive, he's still there. He doesn't like the fact, well, obviously his partner got killed by a supervillain, and he does not like the fact that he has to rely on Batman. It's all about him trying to find and use resources in order to solve this before the world's greatest detectives does. And plus, it's a tribute to his friend to try and do this. And Mr. Freeze, that whole thing at the end, just like, they figured it out, which, by the way, there were quite a few times in this first arc where I was trying to follow how they came up with who done what, how they came up with Mr. Freeze. And I was kind of lost in the Mr. Freeze part. Either way, they figured it out. They figured out Mr. Freeze was kind of behind it. They were kind of there waiting for him at this Gotham State University doctorate ceremony for Jim Gordon, I believe is what it was. So they were going to give that to him, and then Freeze was going to ambush the air conditioning unit, freeze everybody inside. Yeah. So anyway.
Like you do.
Oh, of course. He's a supervillain, for Pete's sake. Chris Armstrong, what'd you think of our first story here, In the Line of Duty?
Yeah, it's a great start to this series that is kind of like showing you what it's like living in Gotham. It's cool that Batman is kind of omnipresent. There's all sorts of references to him. We really don't see him until, the shit hits the fan at the end, basically. Mm-hmm. There's a big buildup of like, we've got to do this ourselves. And then when it comes down to the wire, like, no, we're not going to be able to do this without Batman.
Yeah.
So they have to turn on the signal. And I'm kind of glad we don't see what happens. We see Freeze, tampering with the air conditioning, and then Batman is flying in from overhead. And that's all you need. Batman's going to take care of Freeze. We don't need to see the fight.
Yeah. Mark, what'd you think, man?
I really enjoyed it. And I love the idea. I love the idea that at the end, like, you have the one cop who's really pushing to like not use Batman, uses the bat, disappears, and he uses the bat signal to call Batman, and he's like, I just want to let you know we did it without you.
Oh, yeah.
And Batman's like, great, don't use the bat signal unless you need it. Fuck right off. Because the story with Gotham has always been the cops were bought and paid for by the mob. And so it was very hard to get anything done. And that's why Gotham was in the legend of Batman is essentially that he came to fight the mob because the mob had bought the police and had made Gotham a cesspool. And then in the absence of the mob, the nutcases took over. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the story of Gotham and Batman, which was, and Chris and I were talking about this before the show started, that was the original pitch for the Gotham TV series, which was, hey, let's look at the early years of Gotham when the mob was running things. And in one season, they killed the mob off.
Wow.
Yeah.
See, I've not watched that show, and I don't know if it's just because, it's like, hey, everybody, it's Batman, but there's no Batman. Okay.
But there was everybody else all the time doing the things that they did when Batman was around.
Yeah, see, now you've watched this clear up until recently, right, Mark? Did you watch it?
I stuck with this horseshit series the whole way through.
Well, that was going to be my next question. I didn't know if you enjoyed it or not. I mean, I know you've shared some feelings about it, but I didn't know if you actually enjoyed it overall.
When it was when it was just a police procedural in the early years of Jim Gordon in Gotham, when he was having to deal with a city that was bought and paid for by the mob, I thought it was interesting. Look, it's not that I didn't like seeing the early Penguin and the early Riddler, but they made a mistake, in my opinion, bringing those characters out and basically making them into Batman villains without Batman way early. Like Bruce Wayne's still a kid when all that's going on. Mm-hmm. And then they bring in and then bring in and then summarily kill Ra's al Ghul. It's just they just do. There's like 18 different iterations of the Joker. But I don't want to get too much into like a review of Gotham and turn this into a TV party. What I'm trying to get at is there's an interesting story to be told with the police in Gotham, when they're not bought and paid for by the mob, or when they're struggling with that. So even though Batman is a thing and he's a force in Gotham, when this story is taking place, the cops are not the usual sniveling, bought and paid for type that we usually get out of Gotham. These are people with pride. These are people who recognize that there are just some things that are out of the grasp of the Gotham City Police, and you have to have a crazy ninja to help you. But outside of that, there's still police work to be done. There's still crimes to solve, and there's a pride in doing that, and that's the thing that's shown through in the first 2 issues that I really liked.
Any other notes there, Chris, before we go into our next story arc?
Yeah, there's several references throughout these early issues to No Man's Land. So this is kind of like taking place in the aftermath of that big storyline from, I think, maybe 1999, 2000, where briefly Gotham had been like in ruins from an earthquake. And I think there was like a virus that was rampant throughout the city, and basically the U.S. government cut off Gotham.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
I'm aware of this story. It was also used as a major plot point in the final season of Gotham. So once again, they took a story where Batman had been around for a long time, and they used it for before Batman was ever a thing.
Yeah.
I really want to find the people who wrote that show and punch them in the neck.
But yeah, this is kind of all coming out of that, and I wondered, like, why is Gordon, like, if you're going to do a Gotham Central comic book, it seems like Jim Gordon would be the lead, like, or Bullock, Harvey Bullock. Those are the two most famous cops in Gotham in the Batman comics. But apparently in the latter stages of No Man's Land, Gordon's wife was murdered by the Joker, and that led to his retirement or semi-retirement or temporary retirement, whatever. Eventually, of course, he comes back because he's a comic book character, and nothing changes for more than a year and a half or so. But that's why he's not really involved in these issues.
And Bullock's mentioned a couple times, but he doesn't show up, does he?
No.
He shows up in later, I think one of the later trades, he's on the cover, so he does show up eventually. But I actually looked that up too, because they make references to like how he was disgraced, where apparently he had tipped off the mob to the location of a witness who had murdered a cop or something and got the guy killed. So he had to lie. He was like retired or handed in his badge and disgrace. I don't guess he went to prison or anything, but he lost his job.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say he was mentioned a couple times in these first 10, the last story, which was Half a Life, I believe.
Montoya one, yeah.
Yeah. All right, well, let's move on to Motive. This is a 3-parter, I believe, issues 3, 4, and 5. This one is basically based around the whole Firebug thing, which was mentioned a couple times in the first 2 issues. There is this villain out there called the Firebug who's catching buildings on fire, causing all sorts of havoc throughout Gotham, and the police are investigating and trying to track him down. Meanwhile, our good buddy, Detective Driver, is still trying to figure out who murdered Bonnie Lewis. Because, we found out she was missing, and now we find out she's murdered in this story arc as well. And it turns out, as they go throughout the book, these 2 incidents are completely related. We find out that the Bonnie Lewis was babysitting for a couple.
Yeah, and the nosy bitch went through the closet when she wasn't supposed to. Got her ass fucking killed for it. I'm not saying you should kill babysitters. I'm just saying maybe keep your grubby mitts off my shit.
Stay out of my closets. All right, that's not what I pay you for.
That's right.
So she finds out that the dad that she's doing the babysitting job for actually is the Firebug, and it's neat how they get to that, of course, conclusion. A lot of what you got to remember here, folks, is it's again police procedural. I'd have Mark recite SVU for you again, the intro to SVU, but I'm not going to do that. But it's police procedural. So what you do is it's neat to see how they lay this out. Now, this one was specifically penned by Brubaker, but you can see how a major crimes unit would work. They follow the steps. They interrogate. I think one of the neat things in this one was they were interrogating all these potential suspects.
Questioning, sir. It's not an interrogation. They were questioning. They were investigating. They gotta talk to witnesses.
Mark, you act like you have some kind of, I don't know.
They're not interrogating, sir. That's a whole other thing. They're not being. They don't like. Hey, where were you on the night of? And then they waterboard the person.
Okay, good point. I'll take that. Okay, so anyway, yeah, it's neat how they come to a conclusion. They figure out the firebug was the dad, and we also find out that he was the killer of this poor babysitter, and he was trying to blame it on a homeless Jim in the park. So, all right, Mark, motive are 3 issues there, written by Brubaker. What'd you think?
Yeah, like I said, I'm a sucker for a good police procedural, a good whodunit. It's actually amazing I don't read more mystery books. Books are for burning. But yeah, this was very not comic booky. Like, if it wasn't for the fact that one of the people that they're investigating happened to be a guy running around in a silly suit and a flamethrower, this could have very easily been like a Law and Order episode or The Shield or something. Not The Wire, not enough fucking, but not enough crack dealing. But any number of the other like detective shows on TV, this was like straight out of that. This was, they literally read a comic book where if any number of the other books written in around the same time would have had baby Darkseid and syphilis and universes collapsing into each other. But here you have this really small story about 2 detectives trying to figure out who murdered this handsy little teenager. And it's like, and literally all they do is question witnesses. They figure out timelines and they follow the evidence to where it points. And it pointed at the dad who killed her because she found his firebug stuff. Mm-hmm. And it was less about him as firebug and more about them solving a murder. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, wow, this is really cool. Like, this is, I can't imagine these sold very well, but this is one of those things where like, this is really brave of DC to have put this out there, because who wanted a Gotham Central comic? Who the fuck was like, I'm going to read Superman and Aquaman and everyday police shit?
I would be willing to bet it was Brubaker and Rucka that made a pitch, that it was their idea and they went to DC with it. I can't imagine anybody at DC was like, this is a book we need to be pushing.
Yeah. You know what we need to be pushing next to Justice League and Superman, fucking cop stuff. But here's the other thing. Like, I would imagine also they were like, you won an Eisner Award? Yes, I did. Hey, what do you want to do? What can you bring to the table? It's like, I want to write cop procedurals. So they're like, you fucking won an Eisner Award. Fine, whatever.
Well, you're saying it right here. This is a good story. I find it to be a good story. Mark, you're Hulk smash all the way, but you find this to be a good story as well.
I like, this is in my wheelhouse, because when I'm not Hulk smashing, I'm wiring. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Like I said, I could have used a few more like drive-bys and crack dealings, but whatever.
Well, yeah, there's plenty of, for Big 2, yes, I agree with you. This seems like kind of an outlier, specifically if it was Marvel or DC. There's plenty of independent comics that are very similar to this. And I think you're right. This is something that a Big 2 company is not normally going to push, because they have all of that superhero brand that they usually want to try and push. So, but yeah, I agree with you. All right, Chris, what do you think, man?
This was probably my favorite of the 3 arcs that we're going to cover on this episode, which I'm a huge Brubaker fan, and this was his solo story. But it's you keep saying The Wire and The Shield. I never watched Hill Street Blues, but this is what I imagine Hill Street Blues was probably like.
I got that theme song in my head.
I was actually thinking NYPD Blue.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, because Law and Order has the lawyer stuff as well, whereas this is just the cops hanging out in the station room and whatnot. And also, we should point out that this isn't just the regular cops in Gotham. This is the Major Crimes Unit, which Commissioner Gordon kind of handpicked all of these people to come up, at least up to this point. Now, he's gone now, and there's a new commissioner picking people, but these are all kind of his handpicked, like, best of the best, the ones he could trust. And so they're not just like the regular beat cops necessarily that we're focusing on. But yeah, this is a really interesting story. It's a lot of them, hitting the pavement, going from one witness, to the next, that leads them to the rich asshole who's and like when they're interviewing, the girl whose kid she was babysitting, their parents, they come off as just, like they could care less that this girl died, really. Mm-hmm. And the dad is constantly like, how much longer is this going to take? I'm very busy.
I pegged him. That's what I was doing. I was like, I'm going through this. I'm like, okay, who did it? That dude did it. He had to have done it.
That is so Law and Order, though.
Right.
Like, whenever, like, if you watch an episode of Law and Order, there's always like the people who the people who really did the crime, but they're always such dicks about everything. Like, you are wasting, and it's like they just reek of white privilege. Like, no, there's no minority ever acting that way. It's like they're saying a different thing. Like, rich white folk, when they get interviewed for these crimes, it's just like, I'm late. You.
I'm late for something.
You who are supposed to be protecting me are now a major inconvenience in my life. Move on.
Mm-hmm.
It's great.
Yeah, once they have him, they kind of have him pegged, and they bring him in for quote unquote answer a few more questions, and they leave him in the interrogation room while they're basically searching his house. They find all of his stuff, and he's kind of sitting there none the wiser. We get a shot of a beeper, which was a blast from the past.
2003, baby.
Yeah, he has his stuff hidden behind a trap door that kind of triggers his beeper whenever somebody opens the access panel, and that's kind of how he knew the babysitter had found his stuff, and he had to deal with her like immediately.
The first episode of season 5, the final season of The Wire, opens with Bunk and whoever his partner is at the time interviewing 2 street kids who were involved in a murder. They've got their hand on top of a copy machine. Okay. And the sergeant, the sergeant in charge of the homicide unit is playing the role of polygraph operator.
Okay.
And so they ask him a question, and they're like, "This polygraph machine." They told them the copy machine was a polygraph machine. Okay. And they're like, "This polygraph machine doesn't lie." And so they have their hand on the copy thing, and they just hit it, and they ask them a question, and they hit a button, and a page comes out, and it just says "lie."
Oh, nice.
Like no or something like that. It's just like one word on a paper in big print, and the kid's like freaking out now. He's like, "Oh God, it knows."
People are idiots.
The polygraph sheet never lies.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, it's good stuff. So apparently this is a thing that happens, is that detectives will often be less than truthful with a potential with a witness or potential somebody that they think committed the crime in order to get to the bottom of things. And I guess it's like maybe it's not necessarily breaking the law, but it's certainly stretching it just a bit.
Again, it was a fun story to read. I had a good time. Anything else there, Chris?
This is the one story of the 3 that they don't need Batman. They don't utilize Batman. He shows up. He saves a baby from a burning building at one point. He shows up at the end so Driver can rub it in his face that they didn't need him. But this is one that was all the cops.
Yeah,
which I appreciated.
Yeah, it was. Just like you said, it was kind of nice for Driver to get his word in edgewise.
That's right. It was the second story where the guy calls Batman, not the first one. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. But yeah, so all right. Well, I liked at the very end when the firebug was, the guy, the rich asshole who's in the questioning room or the interrogation room. This is the time they're interrogating him, right, Mark?
Yeah.
Thank you. Anyway, he tries to like explode something in front of him, and they have like the lady sitting in the back, Romy, I think, the detective driver's partner, sitting in the back, just ready for it with the extinguisher. As soon as he does something, she like hoses him down, and Driver looks him in the face and says, "I can't tell you how much I wanted you to do that." That was great. All right, well, let's go ahead. We'll get into the final 5-parter here.
No, this is my favorite.
Half a Life. All right. Now, this one, we're switching gears here. We're focusing on Detective Renee Montoya, who is one of the more famous Gotham Central people that I know. Renee Montoya, doesn't she end up being like the Question at one point? I want to say she was in 52. I remember that being a thing. And yeah. Mark, do you remember her show? I think she showed up in the Batwoman, it was Batwoman that we read. I think she may have showed up in that at one point.
Yes, she's also going to be a featured character played by Rosie Perez in the Birds of Prey, blah, 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 yakety schmackety Harley Quinn movie.
Oh, that's blah. How is that going to fit on the marquee? It's just not, ladies and gentlemen. It's
really
not.
Small font.
Really, really tiny.
It's literally going to say Birds of Prey, blah, 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 yakety schmackety Harley Quinn.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Oh, yeah. So, I'm looking at her wiki right now. Renee Montoya showed up as the question in 52, number 48 in 2007. But yeah, okay.
It's not continuity anymore.
All right. Well, this one really, like I said, focuses on Renee Montoya, and she gets pretty much she's framed for murder. One of the big things that happens is she is outed as a lesbian in
Get
front
your
of
politics out of my comics.
No.
Now this one, I really early 2000s.
So the backstory on this is that she busted a guy, I think, for like what, rape? Was it?
Yes, yeah.
And then he gets off. He like tries to stab her, and he still ends up getting off on like a technicality or whatever. So then now he's suing her for police brutality. Then he hires a PI to find something on her so that he can basically shame her, make her life miserable. Like this is all for revenge for catching him, for trying to put him in prison for raping a gal. And like you do. She's kept it a secret because of her parents, because, it's 2000 and we're not as woke then as we are now when it comes to homosexuals in the police department. So she's just like just trying to do her job, live her life, and nobody really needs to know who she's banging. And this guy just kind of just upends her life because he not only finds this out about her and like sends the picture around the Gotham, police department, but also sends a picture to her parents, who are like strict, I guess, Catholics.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're none too pleased. Not to mention, I think he also like puts the girlfriend in danger, D.
Yep.
So, but
that's what sets her off. Go ahead.
But as it turns out, he's not really acting alone. He's a patsy. He's a pawn that's being used by Two-Face, who has the best line in this whole book. Montoya's like he basically is just like does this, destroys her life so that she'll run to him because he's there for her, because he's in love with her for some odd reason. He's like, it's me and you, Renee. It's me and you. And she's like, dude, I'm into chicks, vagina. I likes the girl.
And he knows that. I mean, he knows that.
Right. And he's like genuinely befuddled and goes, what does that have to do with me and you? That's the best line ever. I need to use it more with other people, just no matter what they're saying. I'm like, and what does that have to do with me and you? I read that. I like stopped what I was doing and read that line to my wife, and she cracked up laughing. Was like, that's such a guy thing to say.
Oh yeah. Yeah. He's completely involved in just, his infatuation with her. Has no clue and no care. As I said, not no clue, because he has a clue.
In his mind, she exists solely to make him feel good.
Yeah.
Like she's not her own person. She belongs to Two-Face in his mind. And that's the thing. It's like, you read enough Batman comics, and it's always about blowing up the city or gassing the city or kidnapping people, murdering them. In this nutcase is genuinely in love with this woman, but he's such a sociopath about it. It didn't have to be like a supervillain in this. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like this could have been any nutcase.
Yeah.
Who acted this way and had some money and some influence to have pulled this off. This didn't have to be Two-Face, but it's a Batman spinoff, so it's Two-Face.
I agree. Of course, at the end, Renee is rescued, I guess you would say, but I think she had things well in hand. As a matter of fact, I think she would have probably killed Two-Face if she could have, because it looked like she was about to. But Batman steps in. Batman actually shows up. I want to read it here because she is, of course, screaming the same argument many people do about how, what are you going to do? Just throw him back into Arkham Asylum again? You're going to run into this problem over and over and over. I mean, she went through torture. Well, I say torture. I mean, okay, let me try that again. She has been tortured. While it hasn't been physically, clearly this has been an emotional attack on her by forcing her out to her parents, forcing her out to her peers at work. And then she goes to jail for the framing of the potentially killing that rapist son of a bitch, goes to jail. On the way to jail, the bus that's carrying all the fugitives to jail gets hijacked, and she is the only one missing after these people who work for Two-Face abduct her. So now everybody thinks she's a fugitive on the run. Then she's sitting at Two-Face's abode underground, and he obviously is clearly psychotic. Then, at the end, when he says he makes the decision that he's going to kill Dee, he does the flip of the coin. He's so mad that she is in love with Dee that, okay, well, I've got to eliminate that part of it and you'll be mine completely. I should have killed her in the first place. And of course, Montoya goes off and she is about to potentially kill Two-Face. I mean, she's got him on the ground and they're reaching for the gun. And then that, of course, that's when Batman comes in and socks Two-Face right in the face. Two-Face right in the face. I don't know which side, but it was one of the faces. But so yeah, Batman says to Montoya, says, I took care of it. And Montoya looks at him and says, you what? Says, you took care of this so he can break out in another year or two, put me through this again. That's how you take care of this.
So what cracks me up about that is that years later, they'll do the Injustice comic and Montoya will be on Batman's side.
Oh, really? I read the first. What did we do? We did the first season, didn't we?
We did part of the first season.
Part of the first season. Okay.
And she actually has an interesting turn in that where like she takes like fucking all the steroids and she goes nuts.
What? Really?
Well, in the game, you take a pill and suddenly you have like Superman strength.
Okay.
So when you're doing like
even that.
Yeah, so when you're doing the fight, it's not like a completely ridiculous, uneven fight, between a guy who was a mortal man and, Wonder Woman or Superman or Aquaman who has super strength. Mm. So everyone kind of takes these steroid pills and she took like a dozen and like hulked out basically. She looked like Gray Savage She-Hulk.
Oh, crazy. So Batman says you were fighting for the gun. Either he would have killed you or you would have killed him. Neither option was acceptable. You're welcome. And then Batman is off. No wonder nobody likes him. Okay, now Chris, huh?
What a dick.
What a dick. Chris, you yelled, sir. You yelled, get your politics out of my comics. Now, sir, I don't know if you're serious or not, but
I
either
was just making fun of the Comicsgate douchebags.
Okay, all right. Now,
this was a big deal at the time. Like,
was it?
There weren't many gay characters in Marvel and DC comics. There weren't none, but there weren't very many.
Yeah.
So we'll always have the one dude from Alpha Flight.
North Star, baby.
Yeah.
All right.
That's how memorable that was.
What do you think? What do you think of this? What was this one called again? This was Half a Life.
Half a Life.
Half a Life. What'd you think, man?
Yeah, it's really good. Like all three of these stories, I think are great. I like the moment. They out Renee by there's a picture of her kissing her girlfriend or her friend who I guess is eventually going to be your girlfriend. They post it on the bulletin board at the precinct.
Gotcha.
They send a copy to her parents so her parents see it. And her reaction, when she sees it on the bulletin board, it's not, she doesn't blow up or anything. She just stares at it. You can see like on her face, she realizes, well, it's out now. There's no hiding from it now. And she doesn't get mad or angry. She just takes the picture down. There is a moment with the captain, who I believe is also a lesbian. She's trying to talk to her. And that's when Renee finally kind of breaks down and starts going off on the captain, saying, you don't know, you're a white lady. You don't have Catholic parents. You don't know what it's like, for me, just because you're also gay. And the captain just kind of lets her vent for about a page. And then she's like, all right, I'm going to say my piece now. And then you can make your decision.
She pulls an M'Baku. She's like, are you done? Are you done?
Exactly. Yeah. But yeah, I really like that scene. There's also a part where one of the asshole cops, as she's leaving, has some crack about the nighttime's the right time for love, huh, Montoya?
Oh,
and she goes, that's what your mother tells me. I laughed out loud when I was reading that.
That was a good one.
So yeah, she doesn't take any, their crap really.
She's a very strong lady. Very strong lady.
There's also a scene with where her brother shows up, her younger brother, who has known that she's gay for a while. And he tells her, hey, mom and dad got this picture, in their mailbox. And he basically tried to convince her to like not come out to her parents. Like, yeah, I told them it was probably photoshopped or whatever. So I kind of covered for you. And yeah, it was just really sad.
It is.
Just because like you would think he would have her back. But he's like, no, you're just going to upset him. There's no reason. Like, you should keep hiding it.
Yeah.
Jesse, go ahead.
It shows you how alone she is. Like, even her little brother, who they clearly have a good relationship, like even he's like not going to help her through this.
Yeah, it's a good talking point because there's been plenty of times in my life, and I'm sure in your boys' life as well, that you run into a situation where, okay, is this worth telling my parents or telling somebody I love about what's going on when, it's not going to really do anything to change or make our relationship any better. People make those types of decisions every day, and I'm not a straight white male guy.
Yeah, why are you even talking?
We don't
about
have
this?
as much to worry about.
I can't discuss anything about. I can't discuss anything. Just like Montoya said, she brought up a lot of good points with her captain there. Yeah, there's a lot of shit that she has to deal with that someone like me has never had to deal with. We're two different people from two different lives.
Yeah, you and your stupid white privilege.
Listen here. But I've still run into things where I've had to tell my parents something that I don't know if I want to tell them because it's not going to, it's going to break their hearts. And the only real thing that you can get out of that is, number one, honesty. Okay, I think that's important, specifically in a relationship. Being honest is important, and I think that strengthens relationships. But my goodness, she can't, she has to come to grips with this. And for a family has very, very strong values, it's got to be a tough thing. It's got to be a really tough thing.
They say that I think one of the leading groups that's at risk for suicide is like the gay and transgendered community, because they're, these are people living with secrets about who they are and what they are for for long periods of time. A lot of them end up being homeless because they do come out to their families, or their families find out about it and they get disowned. Mm-hmm. They get put in the streets. There's a lot of great stories out there. There's a lot of people who are positive on transgender. There are people, Jesse and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, I think it was, where we're like, what if one of our kids turns out to be gay? And and it was like, yeah, I will never be one of those people who says, like, one, I don't have really negative feelings on it anyway, but I will never be one of those people who puts my kid out in the street because of
who they are,
sexuality. Yeah. Like, that's, I made a big joke about it at the time. I don't really need to get into it again, but it was a joke covering my true feelings, which was basically, my kids are who they are. They're my kids first. And whether they turn out to be gay or trans or whatever, they're still my kids, and then I'll always love them.
Yeah. Figure out a way
but not everyone's lucky. Not everyone's lucky to have a dad like me.
No.
Number one. But no, there's a lot of people out there who really struggle with this. They didn't really make too much of an issue out of it in this comic. I mean, it was more, I mean, they dealt with the issue that I'm bringing up about like parents disowning their kids, but she's an adult with a career and everything. And it wasn't really made an issue. I mean, she got made fun of, but I think she got made fun of. The impression I was getting was she was getting made fun of because it happened, not necessarily because she's gay. And it's not like she lost her job. I don't know about that, man. It's not like she lost her job or anything because of it.
No, but I mean, she also has her superior, I think, also can understand where she's coming from. But, those jerks that were in there making those wisecracks, man, I don't know, dude. Those seem pretty off color to me.
I don't know. I think if the point the authors wanted to make was how horrible police can be to queer detectives, it would have been a lot worse. She got some gentle razzing, and then she gave it back, and then it was over, and they were on to other things. It wasn't even I don't think it was a big, I don't know, Chris, break up this fight between me and Jesse. What do you think?
I think they were taking more pleasure in the fact that she had a secret let out, regardless of what the secret may be. Like, you didn't want us to know this, and now we know.
Right.
So it gives them something to hold over her.
Okay.
And give her a hard time about. Yeah.
That's where
more
I was
so than
from.
Maybe they're just being homophobic.
Right. I didn't get like a boys don't cry thing from this. And again, I hate to bring that thing up again, but
I never want to play pinball again. I've never seen
that's the Accused. I got the movies.
Oh, that's right. Now you got me confused.
No, Boys Don't Cry was a different awful thing. Yeah, I didn't get the sense that, like, and again, it's not like she suffered. Look, there are situations where people find out that you're gay, you lose your job on top of everything else. Like, oh, we don't think. What was that? I think it was like Philadelphia, the movie with Tom Hanks where he has AIDS, where it was like he gets AIDS and then like, yeah, we don't think you should work here anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that. That's not what happened here. She, look, police are gonna give each other shit, and I think this was just one of those situations where what he's bringing up is she got embarrassed, and people took the opportunity to kind of give her some jazz about it, but then they moved on, and it really, and like I said, it wasn't a big part of the story.
Oh man! All right. Well, I want to go ahead and put my point in here, and then Chris, I'm going to swing it back to you. I'm gonna let you finish, sir. But give me just a second, because my one talking point really does fit in with what we're talking about here. One of the things that I mentioned earlier was that this is, one of the strongest female characters that we've seen so far in this series. We watch her go through all of these traumatic experiences. Her lover's getting threatened. She goes to jail. She gets outed and all that. But nothing breaks her down more than the people that she loves, her mom and her dad, disowning her and telling her never to come back. That's the only time you see her cry. And I mean, that was powerful to me. I think that was a lot of what they were trying to kind of get across in this writing. But go ahead.
And it would be easy for them, I think Rucka wrote these issues, for him to just throw in a scene where like they're mad, but we're going to talk about it again later. But there wasn't any sense of there's going to be any good resolution to this. It was her parents are really pissed and they're not accepting of her in any way. And, maybe it gets revisited later, but like there's no happy, satisfying conclusion to that aspect of the story.
No, there's Two-Face. He's going to murder her. It's going to murder Dee. There's, the fact that she goes to jail, doesn't break. And then the people that she loves, they're the ones that are supposed to care for her, and those are the ones that hurt her the worst. So, all right, go ahead and finish there, Chris, and then we'll get into final thoughts and all that.
Yeah, a few other things. Renee, I don't know how much we covered, but at one point, Two-Face frames Renee for the murder of the PI and the rapist who had gotten. So she ends up on the other side of the table, in the interrogation room. She ends up on trial. Whenever she shows up to the courtroom, there's no public defender. It's some high-priced lawyer that Bruce Wayne has hired on her behalf, and so it's kind of showing you and letting Batman get his tentacles into the story a little bit more. Obviously, Batman knows who all of the MCU detectives are. I'm sure he knew, she clearly didn't do this, so he was taking care of her defense, which also spurred, whether it was Batman's intention or not, that spurred Two-Face into breaking her out and bringing her to his hideout or whatever.
I got the impression that he knew Two-Face was involved, and that's why he got involved.
That's what I was thinking too. I was like, oh, well, this was, he's keeping tabs on what's going on, kind of interjecting himself. Go ahead.
And the Two-Face Renee stuff, it kind of comes out of nowhere in this story. All of a sudden, she just says it's Two-Face, and then the next issue we find out that's true. I don't know about the volume that you guys read that had the first 10 issues, but the second trade in the Gotham Central collections has a couple of issues before the Half Alive storyline, and they are stories that set up the Renee Two-Face dynamic that Rucka had written. One was I think Gotham Underground number 18 maybe, and then there was a Detective Comics issue, and the Gotham Underground issue took place during No Man's Land, and that's when I guess Harvey maybe first met. I didn't reread those when I read this because I was in kind of a hurry, but I have read before. But I think that's when Harvey and Renee first met, and he got the obsession with her kind of grew from that. They don't really reference it too much in the actual Gotham Central issues, but
you could tell there was a history, but they don't. Yeah.
But yeah, that's pretty much all I got for this storyline.
Okay, very good. Well, what were your final thoughts, Chris? What'd you think, man?
It's awesome. It's one of the best, it's not a superhero book necessarily. Batman shows up from time to time, but even not being a superhero thing, which is what DC is, it's one of the best DC series that I've ever read. Like, honestly, I really, really love it. I'm a sucker for, I like a lot of Greg Rucka stuff. I don't think I've ever read anything by Ed Brubaker that I didn't like, except for maybe some of his X-Men books, which I didn't care for that run as much. But he does Criminal, Fatal, The Fade Out, a lot of that stuff now for Image, crime books mostly. And these read very much like those, including the art, which I like Michael Lark. It's a really kind of
simplistic is the word I'd use.
There you go. And it's focused on like facial expressions are important, but there's not a whole lot of big action that he has to worry about. So it's more about storytelling and facial expressions, things like that. I think he is kind of perfect for this type of book. The interactions between the characters, the dialogue is all really feels natural, and it feels like, you know, a cop show. But that's not a bad thing. It's like if a cop show was really, really, really good. Like it's a really well done cop show. Though it's kind of feels familiar, kind of feels like stuff you've seen before. It's told so well that that's kind of irrelevant.
Very good. Very good. All right, Mark, final thoughts, man. I know you were pleased.
Yeah, no, I think this is one of the best books we've read this year. It's really, really well done. You know, my biggest complaint about some of the DC stuff, I mean, God knows I've beaten the subject to death, is how overly complicated some of these stories are, to the point where I don't particularly enjoy the story. You know, what was it, the Dark Side War that we read, where the whole syphilis joke came from?
Yep. Baby Dark Side.
Baby Dark Side. I mean, I read some of this stuff and it gives me a fucking headache, you know, and then I get something like this. I'm like, I don't think a comic book has to be Baby Dark Side. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I think you can tell just a simple detective story, but, you know, with pretty pictures, and it's just as good. And so that's what I got. That's what I got with this, which was, here's a couple of like noir detective stories. They just happen to be taking place in the same city that a crazy ninja vigilante is running around in a bat costume. And occasionally he shows up and messes with their job, but he's not a major factor in what's going on. So this is about people. And I thought Detective Driver and Montoya, you know, and the captain are all interesting characters, and I wanted to know more about what they were doing. I'm probably, if I have time, and God knows I'm going to have time coming up, I'm probably going to like sit and probably bang this out. It's only like 40 issues. Yeah. And we just read 10 of them.
They are quick. They're nice reads. I mean, you are not bogged down with a lot of, we say police procedural, but trust me, they do a great job of balancing the facts along with what's happening in the art. And this is not the Kree Skrull War. No, there's three. I can remember one or maybe two solid pages in a row. It was nothing but art. You know, you were just following what was going on, and it was told very well. Didn't need any words.
But it wasn't like a splash page filled with monsters, or, you know, Iron Man's team and Captain Marvel's team fighting each other. I mean, it was just, you're right, it was just art, you know? Mm-hmm. So I really enjoyed this, and I thought, I'm anxious to see what else is in this comic, you know? And I wish, just to kind of round back to the earlier point that I made, when they initially announced that they were going to be doing a Gotham series, this was basically the pitch. It's like, hey, let's do the early years of Gotham and Jim Gordon, and you know, we'll show like early Penguin and kind of early Riddler, but we don't want to get too into it. And then unfortunately that changed, I think, because people were like, well like where's Batman? Like, fucking idiots, he's not in the fucking show. This isn't that show. And, you know, and then executives started freaking out and they shit their pants, and they was like, oh, we gotta do a Batman show. Like, well, Batman's not in the show, that's not the premise. Like, but Batman. And it's like, ugh. And so we missed out on a really, really fun idea. You know, the idea that this was going to be a police procedural in this town that's going to lose its shit 20 years from now when a bunch of psychos start trying to gas the city on an ongoing basis. And instead, that's exactly what they did. They just did it without Batman. But this comic book is what that show could have been and should have been, is my point. I didn't know it existed until Andrew Graham proposed that we do it. So I want to thank him for putting that out there and letting us know that while Gotham sucked, Gotham Central is awesome.
Yeah, agreed. All right, Chris, you said you had one more point?
I forgot to mention earlier. This isn't a complaint about Gotham Central, which is I really like, but about DC's use of the characters post Gotham Central, because you mentioned earlier Renee Montoya. Eventually, she becomes the Question, which is a superhero character essentially, and also Crispus Allen, her partner in Gotham Central, ends up at some point becoming the Spectre.
That's crazy.
And it's like, you're taking these two characters, which it's kind of forgivable with the Question a little bit, because the original Question is just a regular person that was
I was going to say he probably
kind of a detective type. And plus Greg Rucka took the character that he kind of defined in these issues and turned her into the Question. So he was kind of had a guiding hand on that. I'm not sure about the stuff with the Spectre, but like taking the grounded characters from these issues and turning them into the Spectre, what are you doing? It seems so absurd, but I guess comics are absurd in general. So whatever.
When we do, apparently, well, okay, just from this is from the wiki. The deceased Alan became the Spectre during the events of Infinite Crisis. He was briefly turned into a Black Lantern before regaining the Spectre mantle.
All right. So is he still the Spectre?
I do not know. I can find out.
It's probably all different now.
Yeah, I was going to say, we reset everything.
So with that said, now that Doomsday Clock has brought the Watchmen into the DC universe, I hope we find out Bullock is Rorschach.
Oh, wow.
I don't know.
I put that into the universe. Ha ha, comic readers.
All right, I've got to roll out, though, guys.
All right.
So I'll let you finish up without me. I appreciate it.
Hey, no problem. You want to plug anything before you get out of there?
Just check out the unspokendecade.com. It's a 90s comic fan site. You can check out their Facebook page. They've got a Twitter as well. My Twitter is @BrodyMan34.
Very good. All right. Thanks for joining us, man. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye. All right, Mark. Well, I guess we'll just go ahead and get into plugs here, man. Hey, my final thoughts on this real quick. I would like
to do an hour and a half more on queer and gender transformative issues, please.
Okay, I want to mute me. Okay. And then you have the floor for the next hour and a half.
Thanks.
So, I had a good time reading this as well. I had a fun time. It like I said, I can't echo much more of what you guys have already said without it becoming redundant. Other than I think the story was told well. The art did it did it justice. It doesn't have to be over the top. It doesn't have to be insane 2-page splashes of heroes fighting each other to be a good story. And this was it.
So Andrew Graham asked me, he was like, hey, how come you didn't synergize this with like doing a TV party on Gotham? And I'm like, I tried. No one watches it.
It's true. I've not watched one episode. There's a gluttony, a bulk of superhero shows now. This is not really a superhero show, to be honest. It doesn't sound like. I mean, it takes place within the universe. You got plenty to pick from.
It's more of a supervillain show.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's more focused on watching the villains rise. I'm pushing my way through Legends right now. I've got Daredevil season 3. I've got to watch at some point. I've got to really catch up on the Flash. There's just so much I haven't watched, and Gotham's going to be bottom of the barrel before I actually hop into it.
So not even worth it. Honestly,
really,
it's not worth watching.
That's sad. All right, Mark. Well, I've had a good time discussing this with you. Why don't we go ahead and we'll get into plugs? You got the schedule sitting around there?
Okay, this week, tomorrow, we've got Men in Black International. We've got the new Rammstein this week. And then on Thursday, it's the return of the Screaming Boy podcast, myself, and a whole lot of love. Bam, 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 on a whole lot of love. This Thursday, we're going to talk about toxic fandoms. Speaking of Hootie and the Blowfish.
Mm-hmm.
Last week was Dark Phoenix week all week long. We had a source material of the Dark Phoenix saga written by the very wordy Chris Claremont.
Mm-hmm.
Reviewed the Dark Phoenix movie, which bombed like Hiroshima, baby. Oh boy. Then we took a break from that, and we reviewed the new Oakley Dokley, Hadley Toodly. And then on Thursday, Bloody Thursday, June 13th, we did an on-trial for X-Men 3: The Last Stand, which, as it turns out, is a better movie than Dark Phoenix.
Oh, wow.
Shots fired, bitches.
That is rough. rough. Well.
Next week, we've got Heroes in Crisis, otherwise known as Kill Tom King. So we got Heroes in Crisis. We got Toy Story 4, which apparently is getting rave reviews. I don't know why. It has a suicidal character in it.
Spork.
The new Spork. We've got the new Amon Amarth. And then you and I are getting together again. You ready? You ready for Black Mirror Season 5?
Oh, man. Have you watched any of that?
No, I don't really watch things. I'm going to not watch it until the week going into the show, or I'm going to forget everything. And
I understand. And that's a good point. No, I'll tell you right now, the first episode, you're going to feel a little uncomfortable.
The guy fucks another pig?
Well, I don't know if it's that bad, but it's I say uncomfortable, but it's be ready. I'm curious to how this is going to end, because I've only made it like half an hour in, and we couldn't, of course, you can't watch it during the day with kids around. So be ready. This is at least that first episode.
Yeah, I'll try not to watch this one in front of my kids.
It's a bit risque, but yeah, it's going to be interesting. I'm curious as to see where they want to go with it. But go ahead.
So I'm going to pitch you a show idea. It's a source material junior.
Junior. Is this going to involve children?
Yes. Okay. My daughter finished Mira, the Mira trade paperback. It's like 5 or 6 issues or whatever. So she finally finished it today. Now she's on the first book of Spider-Gwen.
Ooh, interesting.
So yes, I'm making her read comics all summer to keep up her reading. So I think you should do like a special source material junior show and have my kid on talk about the comic books that she's reading.
I think we could do that. I mean, we just got to figure out a time. That's all we got to do.
It'll have to be during the day because she turns into a pumpkin at 9 o'clock.
I forgot. Yeah, I remember. Our Godzilla commentary got awful quiet at one point.
Yeah, it did. Why is Godzilla? All right, and then we kick off July with Jessica Jones. Jessica Jones season 2 on Netflix dropped on June 14th. We had to kind of move some stuff around. We had to kick Batman versus Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to later on in the year or next year or whatever. I had to kick it off the
March
calendar.
2020.
That's right. So we got Jessica. So we're going to continue with what we started with Jessica Jones. We did volume 1 of the Bendis run for Jessica Jones season 2 last year. So I initially had something else up here, but I decided, let's continue with Bendis. So we changed it. I changed it with this shit. I run this joint. I changed it to Jessica Jones volume 2, The Secrets of Maria Hill. Because I wanted to keep going with the Bendis stuff. And then there'll be a TV party for Jessica Jones season 3. We've got the new Upon a Burning Body on July 3rd, and then I should be pretty close to being in the hospital by that point. They took my blood on the 14th, and then it's supposed to be like a 2 to 3 week wait to go into the hospital to get my transfusion back in of CAR T cells. So that should be sometime around July 5th. June 7th, I was on somebody else's show. I did a gimmick show called Factor Florida. For this dude.
You didn't even tell me anything about that.
No. Well, I wanted to see how it was going to go before I fucking blabbed about it. So, yeah, I actually went on somebody else's podcast. He had me on the dude. Turns out he actually lives here in Florida. So we did a gimmick called Factor Florida. He was like, oh, so tell me, like, do you edit your shows? It'll like me edit. But apparently he has to edit himself. He doesn't. He is blue, but he doesn't want to be recorded blue. So he kind of has to edit himself down to where he's acceptable. And I'm like, yeah, I don't give a fuck. I just let it fly.
When you get a link, make sure to share it so I can listen.
Absolutely, I will absolutely share it around. Anyway, what happened on the 14th was I was basically like hooked up to like what would be like a dialysis machine, and that's where they took my blood that they're gonna freeze and then send to a lab to be re-engineered into CAR T cells. I'm gonna talk all about this. I'm gonna start doing like some audio journals about the CAR T experience, because what I have found is that like if you look up if you just Google CAR T, there's a lot of what the scientific procedure is, but not a lot about like what is the real person experience.
That would probably be a good idea. A lot of people who are going to go through that would love to probably hear about it.
Yeah, so I know I did a whole bunch of stuff last week to get set up for it, including the blood draw. So I got to sit down and record that and kind of talk about that. And then when I go into the hospital, while I'm there, I'm going to, start doing some audio journals about that experience. And then when I come home, what that's like, because this is about an 8-week process overall. There's there's the hospital stay, there's the 30 days of having to, which part of it's the hospital stay, of having to be close to the clinic, and then you can't drive for 8 weeks. And I don't know what my experience is going to be like. I don't know if this is even going to work. It's got a high percentage of chance of working. I think the number he gave me was 40%. The number I've seen on the internet is 80%. So we'll see what happens. I hope I never have to go through this again.
Yeah, jeez. We're all on your side, man. All on your side.
Well, I appreciate that.
All right. Anything else?
I think your listeners have heard me talk way too much tonight.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'll throw the old can plugs in here at the end. Thank you all for joining us. This has been our coverage right here on the Source Material Podcast of Gotham Central. We will talk to you next week. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Thank you all for joining us. Make sure to give that Rattlich in Broadcasting Facebook page a like to stay up on top of all the great podcasts we have to offer. We are at home on Spreaker, but you can also find us on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, and recently we have hit the air on Spotify. Find your favorite podcast platform and type in RADULICH to subscribe for some great content. If you enjoyed this show, please feel free to share and spread the word. And as always, we appreciate any feedback and look forward to entertaining you again soon.
Daddy, I just heard the all-new Adventure Bay with Pop-Up Adventures is opening at Jungle Island.
That's great. Let's go this weekend. I heard they have a new pop-up zip line and a rock climbing wall at the all-new Jungle Island Adventure Bay.
Wow, Dad, that would be great. My friends went last week and they had so much fun at the escape room attraction. And they saw the twin orangutans too.
Of course. Your mom and I grew up loving Jungle Island and the 300 vibrant birds that made Jungle Island famous. And you can take a ride on the Jungle Island Superflight. I know your mom wants to try it too.
Visit jungleisland.com to plan your next adventure.
With Dunkin' Go-Tos, you can get a great deal on two of your favorites, like 2 egg and cheese wraps for $2, 2 bagels with cream cheese spread for $4, and 2 bacon, egg, and cheese croissants for $5. In my opinion, it's a deal that's pretty tough to beat. That's just if you want my go-to cents. If you don't want my go-to cents, it's go too late. Dunkin' Go-Tos, a great deal for $2, $4, or $5. America runs on Dunkin'. Participation may vary. Limited time offer. Exclusions apply.